Today we're discussing The Mighty Chewbacca in the Forest of Fear by Tom Angleberger, with illustrations by Andy Tom. And watch until the end when the author himself will join me to answer some of your questions about the book.
The Star Wars Show Book Club is a series where we gather friends and fans to read Star Wars books, examining how they relate to all of the Star Wars films, live-action shows, animated series, comics, and games. Through these stories, we enrich our understanding of the galaxy far, far away.
Hello, Kristin Baver here, ready to translate some Shriwook with a few new friends. Our story begins sometime after Chewbacca is rescued from Mimban, meets Han Solo, and climbs into the co-pilot seat of the Millennium Falcon in Solo, a Star Wars Story. But before the Rebel Alliance makes its daring heist on Scarif in Rogue One, a Star Wars Story. This time, Chewbacca's on his own pet-sitting some Tuca cats when he gets thrown into a new mission with Maeve the Bounty Hunter / Librarian and K2SO in cunning disguise as simple cargo droid K2SB on a mysterious planet plagued by the dark side of the Force. Chewie, K2, and Maeve will have to confront their own fears, avoid getting eaten by some hungry, snarling creatures, and snag a relic from deep inside a dark side temple. Can they do it? Let's meet our book club crew to find out together.
Joining us today, we have Twitter's queen of the dad joke and Star Wars.com's master craft maker, Kelly Knox.
Hello!
We also have Star Wars.com contributing writer and editor-in-chief of Fantha Tracks, Mark Newbold.
Yeah. Hi.
And actor and renowned Chewbacca expert, Joonas Suotamo.
Hi, everyone.
Now, to get us started, I'd like to go around and hear about everyone's favorite character from the book. And I'm going to start with Joonas because I would bet the Millennium Falcon that I know exactly what you're going to say to this.
My favorite character was, well, of course, main character Chewbacca. Coming from the movies, you know, you go from scene to scene filming these stories, and you never really get to externally observe what's going on in Chewbacca's head. And this book, you know, opened my eyes to some things that I've never really had thought about, you know.
I love Chewbacca, of course, but I have to say that just like in Rogue One, K2 stole every scene that he was in. K2SO is so good in this book, and I was so happy to see him.
Obviously, Chewie's awesome. He's always awesome. And it was cool to see a Han Solo cameo. And I love Cassian. He's one of my favourite characters from Rogue One, so Cassian turning up in it, and K2 was so much fun. For me, it was Maeve. I thought she was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I liked her story. And I know Chewie identified with it as well. They got a similar background.
And you know what? Just to round us out, I'm going to say Goldie, because I love cats, and I was so excited about all the Tucas in this, but also Goldie with her cute little crown and her little bejeweled collar, and she just kept hanging on Chewbacca's shoulder like a parrot. So Tom Angleberger, our author here, has such a fun writing style. I could really hear all of the action in all of his onomatopoeia, both from the way that Chewbacca was banging on the controls to oftentimes the way Chewbacca was responding to things. But it's also kind of a bold choice to have one of your main characters in a story be a Wookiee who doesn't have a translator, who doesn't have, a helpful pal who's always there. How did having Chewbacca in the story with all of his, grunts and moans, but without necessarily always having that translation, how did that influence the way you read the story versus where you can understand all the dialogue in a different story?
Well, I think he said it himself at one point where he said you don't really have to speak Shriwook to understand it, and I thought that was a really good observation, because you always get that feeling from Chewie in the films too, like you understand where he's coming from even if you don't quite know what he's saying.
Right, yeah, that's the best part about playing Chewie and reading stories about Chewie, is that you get to fill in the blanks. And when he, and as he often does, click with something that you value yourself.
There's a scene in Solo, obviously, when Chewie and Han are on the AT hauler on Vandor, and Han can speak Shriwook, so he knows exactly what Chewie's saying, but we know what Chewie's saying almost as well as he does, because he emotes in a way, his body language, just everything that he does, and that you did, Joonas, just brought that character to life. And so when you get into the book, and Angleberger makes the observation that, you don't have to speak Shriwook to kind of understand it. It's the nuances you don't quite get, all the technical details and such.
I thought the illustrations in this book also really added to the story for me. My favorite was probably the Tukas attacking Chewbacca with love, where they're just all like swarming on him. Were there any that stuck out for you, or did the illustrations add anything for you as readers?
I know I flipped the book over quite a few times to see the monster on the back to get just the right picture of what they were facing.
Yeah, I thought the illustrations were fantastic. Tuca cats, to see them, how they behaved on the Falcon, brought to my mind the Porgs, but the Tuca cats were even more capable of destroying.
That shot of Chewie being sort of launched upon by the Tukas took me way back to the early 80s when Chewie had a similar situation with the Hoojibs in the old Marvel run. So it kind of took me back to that. It had that vibe about it as well. So yeah, I would imagine any little creature's going to be attracted to Chewie in that way. He's like the Ewoks were, he's the big brother, isn't he?
He looks just so like soft and cuddly, and I just want a Wookiee hug.
And they officially like hugs, the book said.
I know! I was so excited about that! And also, the bit where I think it was Goldie was kind of curled up in Chewbacca's lap, and it reminded me of that scene in Solo where Rio's talking about, you'll never sleep better than when you're curled up in a Wookiee's lap. And I definitely want to talk about Maeve's face paint in particular, because I thought there was a real richness to the symbols and their meaning, and not only the connection to her heritage, which I thought was really poignant, and the thing that she's out there to save, but also you really got a good sense of what she was feeling, what she was thinking, and what she needed in the moment, because she needed to feel courage, so she painted the symbol for courage. And so I thought that was a really cool way of expressing those things, but also tying her so directly to her heritage and her people, and this thing that she was also feeling like was kind of lost or almost lost.
It's an interesting point of time in the galaxy, though, isn't it? Where this book's set around the time of Solo as part of that run of stories, in that the galaxy's kind of losing its identity. So all the individual cultures are being sort of walked over. It's happened to Chewie's people on Kashyyyk. It's happening all over the galaxy. And the Empire wants to create this like monoculture where everything's the same. They all learn the same stuff. The propaganda's galaxy-wide. They just want to get everybody on the same page.
No, I agree. I really appreciated the description of how the Empire used propaganda in closing libraries. They closed museums, and the Emperor chose that method for her planet instead of, it wasn't just like a big bombardment. It was a lot more subtle, and that part really stuck with me too.
Up until I read this book, I never really thought much about Chewbacca missing Kashyyyk and Chewbacca, feeling fearful, because he just always seems like such a tough Wookiee. We see moments in the films where he's sad or he's mournful, especially when he's about to lose a friend or get separated from someone he loves. But I guess I never really put together that, of course, Chewbacca would feel fear, and it would be more alarming both to him, and it was more alarming, I think, to me, because it happened so infrequently. So when it happened, it was a really big deal.
I thought Chewbacca was really, human and relatable in this. And when I read the part about Chewbacca remembering his son, I was like, whoa, he's got somewhere to be. But but I hope, I think he's all adult now, and he's, running his own smuggling business somewhere, and he's doing fine. But all these sides to Chewie was really revealing and interesting to read about.
It became a very spooky story once they landed on the planet, and the dark side's kind of just emanating from this mist. And I was picturing the green mist that we see in the Clone Wars, but they're in the trees and they feel this peaceful calm just from touching, I guess it would be bark, but it's kind of gross and spongy because it's also fungus. And Chewie says something that translates to trees are life. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you in the context of the book, or just in Star Wars in general?
I think Chewie, being from Kashyyyk, living in those Rorschach trees, and and all the stuff they have to deal with on that planet, those trees are life. They live in the trees, they live off the trees, they give them cover and shelter, it's protection, it's everything that you could need comes from the tree on Kashyyyk. And so you can translate that even to a planet with basically giant mushrooms, like on this world. It's a thing that would make sense to Chewbacca as a character. It's also the fact that Chewbacca and the Wookiees have stayed humble, throughout, whether it's because they've been imprisoned by the Empire, but it's really telling of that humbleness and the looking at nature, the
the thing that gives you everything, basically. Looking at that and respecting that.
Scene there with Maeve and her description of what she felt really brought to mind Yoda's scene in Empire Strikes Back when he was describing the way the Force binds everything together. And the way, for trees, I think in particular, the roots are bound together and the branches kind of make it, she said, I think, feel like a network of life and that everything was connected. So that, I got big Yoda vibes from that part.
Trees in Star Wars, you know, the dark tree on Dagobah, the tree on Atoll, you know, trees do seem to be quite central to a lot of elements of Star Wars. So there's probably a little link there as well.
Thank you so much for joining us. And now I'm realizing when I introduced all of you, I should have made you do your best Wookiee roar.
Oh, I was hoping you would not do that. Let's do it all on the count of 3 together.
Yes!
Well, that works.
Okay, all right. No one's embarrassed. Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tom. We really appreciate it. Super excited to talk The Mighty Chewbacca and the Forest of Fear with you.
I'm excited to talk about it too.
You infused some of your patented Tom Angleberger humor into the story, so I wanted to talk a little bit about this. When you're writing in the Star Wars galaxy, do you shift your approach to the writing or the jokes at all?
I'm one of those people. I love in-universe Star Wars humor, if that makes sense. For instance, K2SO is hilarious. I think he's one of the funniest Star Wars characters of all time. And his humor is in-universe. It's not like he's making jokes most of the time. Sometimes you have to wonder if he's sort of joking with people. But he is so much fun to write. I really loved writing him. And he's just plain funny.
The Bobby Lynn writes, this story was wonderful. The inclusion of Joonas Suotamo and dark side artifacts was a wonderful surprise. What was the inspiration for choosing Suotamo as an antagonist? Now he just gets like a little bit of a mention, and I think Simu and Simu's daughter play a little bit more of a role, but they're all kind of that crony type family there.
If Simu and Suotamo are both they're both jockeying to be the Emperor's #1 toady, you know? They both want to get there. And so they're both trying to get a hold of anything that's going to get favor from the Emperor. And so I wanted there to be a failed attempt to get this book. And so it's Suotamo had sent out some Trandoshians. They were not tough enough to survive the Forest of Fear, it turns out. I love the way that Star Wars, I mean, since Return of the Jedi came out and we knew a finite amount, now we seem to know an almost infinite amount. And so, you know, those were just these little people in the shadows of Return of the Jedi. And now there's so much information about them that I'm able to go and find out more about them and then even embroider on that a little bit.
How much did you and Andy collaborate on the images? Because I found they really helped me to kind of envision what the creatures looked like and some of the characters, especially Maeve, because this was my first introduction to her. So having that visual representation of what she looked like really helped kind of solidify it in my head as I was going through the rest of the story and watching the action unfold.
You know, the artwork by Andy Tong in this book is absolutely incredible. I love on the front, we see all of our heroes running, and then like, what are they running from? And then you flip to the back, and you see these Corellian hounds down there, and you may think this is a tree or something, and then later when you actually read it, you're going to realize that's not a tree.
Sarah writes, oh my gosh, this book is so much fun. What was it like getting into the mind of Chewie all the while incorporating K2SO? It's such a fun merging of the different eras of Star Wars.
Oh man, getting into Chewbacca's head was fun. And I didn't have all that much connection to Chewbacca before I wrote this book. And then after this book, I'm like, Chewbacca's my guy. I feel like I have this connection with Chewbacca now. But then K2SO, it was all based on that great moment in Rogue One where he says, you're welcome.
Congratulations, you are being rescued. Please do not resist.
I just wanted him to have that attitude the whole way through this. He's not there to help them. He's not helping them. And yet he has this attitude the whole time.
There's a lot of great onomatopoeia in this book. Both when Chewbacca's, banging at the controls of that cruddy ship and just every time Chewbacca speaks. So I would love to hear your best Wookiee roar.
When you're reading through it, and it's all in big letters here, and So he's gonna go like, oh, I can't do it. I don't have enough.
No, that was good. That was great. Tom, do you want to hear who's on the panel for this episode?
No. I mean, yes, I do.
We have special guest Joonas Suotamo reading this book.
What? You
Yeah.
mean Chewbacca?
Chewbacca read your book.
That's crazy. That's nuts. You're kidding me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Tom.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
And thanks to all of you who joined us from home, sent in your questions, and watched along today. Come back next time when the Star Wars Show Book Club returns to Match Wits with Thrawn by Timothy Zahn. And don't forget to tweet your questions using hashtag SWSBCThrawn, and we'll ask some on the next show. Until then, may the Force be with you.